Hey guys, what's up? It's Ripe again. In today's Entitled People story, my psycho neighbor declared my family as the public enemy #1, especially my disabled son. She tries to insult and harass him whenever she can. One time she takes it a step further and tries to run him over. And I honestly couldn't be more angry at this entitled Karen. Here is what happened. From the moment that my family moved into our new house, Karen marked us as her enemy. You might wonder how somebody can hate us before they ever actually met us, and the reasoning comes down to my son. When we moved in and she saw that I had a kid in a wheelchair, she decided it would be a great idea to make her hatred of it known and start out on the worst foot possible. I did not even think people like her still existed where they so blatantly hated on disabled people. I assumed everything was more passive-aggressive nowadays, which I've gotten a lot of through the years with my son. However, she came right up to introduce herself and then told us that she was part of the HOA and did not think that this home would be a good fit for us. When we questioned why, she was very upfront, saying that with my son in a wheelchair, it would not make the neighborhood look good. That a child like ours should be living in a much lower income area or at least sent off to a special school where nobody would have to see him. I was in complete shock and told her that the neighborhood did not look good with her bigotry and slammed the door in her face. She had then went to all the neighbors with some kind of petition trying to get people to back her up that our son did not belong here. That the HOA should go back on their contracts and tell us that we cannot live in that house unless we send our son somewhere else. He is not a little kid either, and at 12 years old picked up exactly on what was going on and that our new neighbor was a total Karen. He did what any 12-year-old boy would do and intentionally made himself known when she was around to just bug her. I know I should not encourage my preteen to do it, but honestly, she deserved it. He would make sure to roll over and loudly talk to her so that everybody could see it. Also, he constantly called her Karen when it was not her real name, which is one reason I'm using it in this story. She had no issue telling him to his face that he should not be living in a nice neighborhood, and he would just snap back right at her like I did that first day. I do want to say that with all the other neighbors he is fully polite and I never heard a complaint. He only does this with Karen and it's only because she started it. Despite being in a wheelchair, my son does everything the other kids do and gets along just fine. This neighborhood has a lot more kids than our old one, so he's often outside playing with them in the streets. It is safe and they move to the side when a car comes, which is not that often since it's a pretty quiet development. He is happy with the new home and except for Karen, we were happy with everything too. Nobody else signed her dumb petition or had issues with a disabled kid living next door to them. One day when all the boys were outside playing, I heard things get a little loud and knew something was up. My mom radar just goes off when there's trouble and a group of kids involved. I go outside and see my son on the pavement with his wheelchair about 10 feet away. He is crying and I run over to him and find out from the other kids what happened. They were playing and they saw a car and moved to get out of the way. Even though he was on the sidewalk safely, the car jumped the curb and hit him, sending him flying out of his chair. And then it backed up and sped away. The description of the car matched Karen's car perfectly and even some kids said it was a woman that looked like her. I called the police and sat there with my son, waiting for them to show up. My son did not look too hurt and stopped crying after only a couple of minutes. I think he got more scared than anything, but he was holding his wrist in a way that made me think it was at least sprained. He might have been trying not to cry in front of all his new friends too, and the police showed up, but around the same time, a car came speeding down the road again. I knew it was the same car because of all the boys going crazy and screaming that it was the same car as before. This time, Karen jumped the sidewalk earlier and seemed to be making a beeline right for me and my son. I had zero time to react and I don't have the strength to pick my son up anymore and move even if I could. The police were faster though and they shot off their guns right into her tires. It slowed her down enough that another officer was able to help us kind of roll more onto the grass and out of the line of the car. I was dazed and my son was back to being scared along with his friends. The police then finally surrounded Karen's car and told the other kids to go home. Karen was taken out of her car and put into handcuffs for reckless driving and attempting to hit my son. Instead of going quietly though, she was going on a massive rant about how the police were arresting the wrong person. At first I assumed she would be saying that it was not her despite being in the actual car and seen trying to do it. But no, she was trying to say that what she was doing was not a crime and in fact acting on behalf of the law by getting rid of my son. That disabled people are not allowed on the streets and she was trying to do everybody a favor by running him over. My guess was after the first hit she did a lap and was planning to fully run him over once he was on the ground. I was hysterical at this point and screaming at her despite the cops telling me to calm down and let them handle things. An ambulance also arrived and my son was gonna be taken to the hospital and checked out after. This caused Karen to get even angrier and say that my son did not deserve the medical care and she was the one that should be getting checked out instead. I went with my son and did not see the end of her arrest or what other horrible things she was saying in regards to disabled people. We were extremely lucky that the first hit did not do much damage besides knocking him out of the chair. He did have a sprained wrist and some bruising, but nothing that would not heal in a few weeks. I could only hope though that the experience did not do permanent damage to his mind, because getting attacked for being in a wheelchair is something that I know can and probably will follow him forever. The chair, by the way, was destroyed from the impact and he needed an entirely new one. Since she destroyed it, I was gonna make sure that Karen was gonna get sued for every single penny of this new chair he was going to get. If she was gonna be a total a-hole to disabled people, she was gonna end up losing a bunch of money that was all gonna be used on him. Of course, we also sued for emotional damages and got money that we were putting aside for his college fund. Minus a little that he deserved to go and have fun with. She was put in jail after no judge or jury would sympathize with her and her story of being in the right because disabled people supposedly don't belong on the streets. And yeah, ripe stars, I guess Karen probably more likely belonged in 1945 or maybe even earlier, because a person like this has no place in any kind of society in this century. What a terrible human being. Anyway, if you enjoyed the story, please don't forget to post some star emojis in the comments and maybe even like the video. That would help me tremendously. The next one is titled HOA Petty Revenge. So I went to visit my mom yesterday and she told me this story. So my brother, 9 male, likes to play with other boys on the block. They usually play soccer or bike races outside and Fortnite or FIFA online. All this during the afternoons and evenings after they are done with homework. They can be pretty loud, but they are the ages 8 to 12. The neighborhood my mom lives in has something similar to an HOA. Basically, they have a representative and they have to pay fees, mostly for security and surveillance, even though it's very safe in general. And the representative is friends with my grandma, who also lives there. So anyway, on a Thursday, the rep calls my mom to tell her that someone complained that the kids were being too loud and it was too late for them to be alone outside. Mind you, it was like 7:30 p.m. They don't have school the next day and the street is pretty illuminated and has cameras basically on every light post. Also, the neighborhood is pretty much gated all around. So anyway, my mom calmly told the rep to ask the person complaining to call her directly, because she was actually outside speaking with the other kids' parents as they were watching them, because this is a family-friendly neighborhood. The representative started getting defensive and said that she didn't want to cause conflicts and make up excuses, and that was that. Later on, Rep was chit-chatting with my grandma and said her nephew, who lives a few houses from my mom's, was having trouble with work because there was too much noise outside. So then my mom knew that he was the one complaining. The thing is, he is basically fresh out of college, which means that he hosts parties from Thursday to Saturday or just blasts his stereo while drinking alone until 4 to 5 in the morning when he passes out drunk. Kind of hypocritical if you ask me. Cue my mom asking the boys to play right in front of his house and yell as loud as they can. My brother's curfew is 8 p.m. so he can get a good night's sleep, but my mom and the other parents extended it to 10 p.m. because they didn't have school the next day anyway. The dude never complained again, but my mom did report him every time his speaker was on after midnight. He eventually stopped except for a party here and there, and all was well. The end. Edit: the problem is not the complaint in itself, it was that the same dude who plays loud music 3 nights a week until 5 a.m. and thus disturbing all the neighbors and their sleep schedules goes unpunished because he has family in the HOA. And he has the gall to ask for others to quiet down when others have asked him the same, and he responds by being louder. I get that kids can get very rowdy, and I know my brother is, but when asked to be more quiet, he does accommodate, and so do his friends. I guess if a 9-year-old can be quiet when asked to be and a grown-ass adult cannot, the problem are not the kid's parents. And yeah, ripe stars, you know, one of the things I dislike the most are double standards and hypocritical people. When someone asks you to be quiet and then plays loud music pretty much every day, you know there is something wrong. The next one is titled Big Pro Revenge. A family friend was working at the same company since he was 26, up to when he was 64 when the below started. I did get his approval to retell the story, just not to include anything specific, so I'm keeping it anonymous. So anyway, part of the problem was the laws in the country increasing the retirement age from 62 to 65 when he was in his early mid-50s, and then again from 65 to 67 when he was about 62 to 63. The old owners were a family and run the business with benefits to the employees. From everything I have heard, I think they were giving an extra vacation week after nearly 6 years at the company. So on top of the standard 4 weeks, he had an extra 6 weeks at the time of the events. Also, people had access to 2 weeks of working home office when the job allowed them to, or an extra week off for those that couldn't use it. So he was getting 11 weeks off each year. As a bonus, the family owners were allowing people above 55 to use their vacation time as they desired. All at once, with about a 2 weeks notice, which was just a courtesy according to the guy, or segment it or even not use it and pile it up for when the retirement time came. Another issue we have at our country is that when you submit retirement paperwork to the government, they take ages. So it is often the case that they may take over 2 years to calculate what to pay you and then start paying you. Of course they pay back that time, but it still is an issue. For the period they delay and calculate, you are getting only the minimum amount, but the guy had already about 44 years of experience and a bit more ahead of him as an engineer, and a well-paid one at that, which meant a great retirement amount. So the owners allowed for people to gather up their weeks of time off at the end of it and take 20 to 30 weeks off while submitting their retirement paperwork, so the money being paid would last them longer into the calculation period. Of course, some didn't use it, but many did. So the company gets sold because the owners saw some writing on the wall that their profiting wouldn't last more than 6 to 7 years more, and they wanted out. It was due to old age as well. New ownership, part of some Coca-Cola subsidiary, takes over and starts removing previous rules. At the guy's position there were 3 of them. Him, a second colleague and a third one, they push out the second, fire him, and the third one has a heart attack literally a week later. They also go and dock his pay by 15% because supposedly he is making too much for a simple engineer. The 3 of them hold a patent for the machinery used on something specific, a second one on how to make that machinery, and a third one on the process of the production of a small but significant part. The old owner had allowed them to put the patents on them when they invented a new 30% cheaper and 75% faster way of production years ago. So suddenly he is alone on that position at 64, and the company hires 6 people for him to train on that position. At the same time, they give up to the end of the year for all the piled up vacation time to be claimed. Notice the wording, claimed, not used. So the guy was using between 1 and 5 weeks for the past decade. So he had gathered 87 weeks of time off. This includes the current year, but they had not looked at specific cases apparently. So then they get him the 6 new people to train, and they tell him that he needs to have them trained in 6 months. He still has 2.3 to 2.5 years until retirement though. So he just goes and takes 87 weeks of vacation time within a 3-hour notice on a Friday evening, starting the upcoming Monday, and still no advance notifying is required. They don't pay attention on it until the next Thursday, when the CEO notices the 6 people sitting around all day and nobody training them. The phone calls start. Then emails and then letters get added to the mix. Then home visits by low-ranking secretaries and such to deliver the letters, and then management visiting his home. By week 7, the CEO has visited 3 times, but the door has not been opened once. His mother-in-law lives literally across the street, an old woman, and him and his wife are taking care of her. So most of the time they are over there and can see everybody visiting their house. The production is actually running on itself, but no upkeep is done on that critical part of it. Week 11, he says that line 1 out of the 2 breaks down. They start visiting his house 3 to 4 times a day. 2 weeks later, the second line breaks down. He obviously has a lot of friends inside and is getting constant updates. At that point, they have only 4 weeks of backstock to keep the rest of the production running. It is December, right before Christmas, and he goes in during week 13. He says he needs to take some things from his locker room, and the CEO starts yelling at him. "You're stopping your time off right now! You're coming back to work to fix everything!" So he offers to come back for 3 days under an agreement that the entire week will be returned to him to use for time off. The CEO reluctantly agrees and tries to push him also for the training. No budging, only fixing things up and going on vacation again. By Saturday, everything is fixed up and even leaves a couple of basic instructions on what needs greasing every week, and he is then off again. A few weeks pass and New Year has come around and a line is broken again. He gets called back and CEO pretends like the previous deal will be used again. So then he goes in for 2 days, fixes everything, explains a couple more things to the team of 6 who by now have other duties not to be sitting around all day, and when he is about to leave, the CEO says, "Tomorrow at 8 AM. The guy says, "What?" And the CEO explains, "You could claim your time off by the end of the last year. You just ended your claimed time off, so you're just losing the remaining 69 weeks. The guy is furious and he just goes straight and reports the company to workers' rights. They are actually dumbfounded by the time off he has amounted, and the lady serving him calls her colleagues to listen in. They laugh their asses off by his story and they actually issue the verdict the next day. It usually takes weeks, but apparently they had too much fun with this one. He is to get all of his time off under the previous rule for the time accrued up before the rules changed. So he has his 69 weeks, should be 70 due to him getting the one he worked on, renewed by their deal, but he lost that one. And he also has the 6 weeks from the new year, so he goes in with the verdict and gives it personally to a fuming CEO. According to the guy, steam was coming out of his ears. The CEO accepts unwillingly the deal with the guy coming in for 3 days every 5 weeks off. If he is needed during his time off, tough luck. They should work to produce backstock. Then a full year goes by that way and the guy is 66 at this point, and he's been training the 6 slowly every 5 weeks. And he is on his last visit before he takes the last 5 weeks off. The CEO goes to him and delivers personally the firing notice for the first day he'll be back. He plays shocked and leaves for another 5 weeks. This one is a problem because if you apply for retirement even with half a year's early or less, you are losing significantly more than just that small period, and he has about 10 months ahead of him for retirement. His last 5 weeks expire and he goes in to gather his stuff, only a coffee cup was remaining. He knew this was coming and he had taken everything over time. He gets an extremely big payout for the firing with no cause. Next day he sends a cease and desist letter to the company for the use of the 3 patents. He had talked with the fired guy who had agreed with this revenge plan. He had also talked with the widow of the now dead friend and colleague as well and had both of them on board. He had been supporting actually the widow, but he didn't say anything to anyone. I found out very recently from the other guy about it. So now the company has to stop using those machines and the method with 0 notice. All the competitors have found and built and patented their own version of the same, and if they don't find a solution, it's going to cost 40% more and take double the time to produce the same part of the procedure of production. So they would need to double the lines if they go and use the old method while they look for a new one. After just 3 weeks of looking to license the method of one of the competitors and not getting anywhere, stock being extremely low by that point, they struck a deal with the guy. He'll be an external contractor who obviously keeps the patents to his name. He will be doing the maintenance on his own, will be paid by the hour, what he was previously making on a full day, and he will be on call for maintenance while having one person there at all time for upkeep. He went and stole all 6 of the people he trained and hired them in his new company and put them to work back at that factory again with almost double the pay they were receiving. He fully trained them very quickly and he was now getting paid a crap ton. That CEO was fired for almost stopping production, the deal was struck mere hours before backstock ended, and he also cost the company a ton of money by firing that guy. At the funeral of the old owner, many of the old employees met up and told their different stories, and apparently there were 3 more similar cases with patent holders because the old owner treated his team extremely well, but he was apparently the one to string them on for almost 2 years by being out on vacation time and getting paid. All of them had a great laugh, including the widow of the owner and his sister, who were the other two partners in the factory before it got sold. Update, correction, 2 points I noticed that are not clear. The 6 people he stole from the factory to work for his new company there, then contracted back to the factory, are earning what he was making when he worked at the company and was considered too much. Their salary was extremely low, so my comment above about them making double is incorrect. Apparently, the factory was paying all 6 combined what the hero was making before he got that 15%. So for all of them it was a huge pay raise. I would leave the factory as well if I received an offer for the same exact work, but an increase of about 550%. This I learned from the hero as an update. Apparently at the time that they stroked that last deal for him to work as a contractor, the backstock was 2 hours from finishing. But what was his last ace up his sleeve in negotiating was that, don't forget that I need at least 3 days to fix both lines. So you already need to shut the factory down for 3 days, and every minute you delay, this deal is another minute of the entire factory being down. Apparently, a single line could not produce enough for production to resume. 2 lines produce about 120% of the required thing for production to continue, so he needed to get both lines up. The factory actually shut down for almost 4 days. And those idiots did not pay the workers for those 4 days that were not working, which ended up a class action from over 800 workers at the Workers' Rights Office. Which then led to a fine and forcing the factory to pay them, and that was the last drop that made the glass overflow. The news got to management from outside the country and ended up costing the CEO his job. And yeah, Ripe Stars, I would say that ridiculous CEO got exactly what he deserved. If you refuse to pay your workers fairly and treat them like this, I would say you deserve even worse. I really hate when multi-million-dollar companies treat their workers like crap.